So, good morning, everyone. Today we will be discussing an interesting topic entitled The Challenges Faced by the Filipino Nation. So, the Filipino nation has long been defined by its resilience and adaptability in the face of various challenges, from natural disasters and economic struggles to social inequalities and political issues. The Philippines continues to confront multifaceted problems that shape its identity and future. This report also explores the key challenges faced by the Filipino people, highlighting their impact on society and the effort being made to overcome them. By understanding these issues, we gain insight into the nation's enduring strength and the collective aspirations for a better tomorrow. So first, let's talk about the agrarian reform. So agrarian reform refers to a government-led initiative aimed at redistributing agricultural land to farmers and landless individuals to promote social justice and improve agricultural productivity. In the Philippines, agrarian reform has been a cornerstone of efforts to address rural poverty and land inequality, which stem from a long history of concentrated land ownership. Programs like Comprehensive Agrarian Reform, enacted in 1988 through Republic Act No. 6657, sought to distribute land to tenant farmers, provide them with support services, and empower them to achieve sustainable livelihoods. These reforms aim to break the cycle of poverty among rural communities, boost agricultural production, and promote equitable economic growth. However, the implementation of agrarian reform has faced challenges, including resistance from land ownership, lack of funding, and inefficiencies in distributing land and resources. Despite these obstacles, agrarian reform remains a critical tool in pursuit of rural development and social equity in the Philippines. So, second, let's talk about the agrarian reform during the post-war period. So, after the World War II, the Philippines faced significant challenges in rebuilding its economy and addressing social inequalities, including issues of land ownership and tenancy. During the post-war period, agrarian reform became a critical focus for the government to address the widespread poverty and unrest in rural areas caused by the unequal distribution of land. In 1947, the Agricultural Tenancy Act was introduced to regulate landlord-tenant relationships, but it has limited success in addressing land ownership inequality. The Hukbalahap Rebellion, driven partly by land disputes and tenant grievances, highlighted the urgency for reform. In response, President Ramon Magsaysay initiated the Agricultural Land Reform Code of 1955, aiming to provide land to tenant farmers and establish mechanisms for land redistribution. However, these early efforts were hindered by weak implementation, resistance from landlords, and lack of political will. While the post-war period laid the groundwork for later reforms, it underscored the complex socio-political barriers to achieving meaningful agrarian reform in the Philippines. So third, let's talk about the excerpt from Born of the People, 1953 by Luis Taruk. So Luis Taruk's Born of the People provides a vivid account of the struggles of Filipino peasants during a time of severe social and economic inequality. As a prominent leader of the Hukbalahap or the Hukbong Bayan Laban sa Hapon movement, Taruk recounts the plight of landless farmers and exploitation they face under the tenancy system in the post-war Philippines. The book highlights the roots of peasants' unrest stemming from oppressive landlord-tenant relations, unfair sharecropping practices, and the lack of government actions to address land reform. Taruk's narrative sheds light on the aspirations of the rural poor for dignity, land ownership, and equitable treatment. Through his personal experiences, Taruk also critiques the systematic failures that perpetuated rural poverty and fueled resistance movements like the Hooks. In the context of agrarian reform, Born of the People serves as a critical reflection on the need for genuine land redistribution and social justice. It underscores how these unresolved issues were not just economic but also deeply political, influencing the broader struggle for national independence and democracy. So next, let's talk about the excerpt from Republic Act number 3844 or the Agricultural Land Reform Code. So Republic Act number 3844 enacted in 1963 under the administration of President Diosdado Macapagal is a landmark law aimed at addressing the long-standing issues of land ownership and tenancy in the Philippines. It suits to abolish the shared tenancy system and replace it with a leasehold arrangement, thus providing tenant farmers with greater security and also control over the land they cultivated. So these are the law keys objectives of this law. So first is land ownership redistribution. It's stated here that to transform tenant farmers into owner cultivators by redistributing private agricultural lands. So second is the leasehold system establishment. It ensures farmers paid fixed rents rather than a share of harvest, protecting them from exploitation. So third is the support services provision to provide farmers with access to credit, infrastructure, and other support necessary for productivity and independence. The law also created the Agricultural Credit Administration or the ACA to provide financial assistance and the Land Authority to oversee land redistribution efforts. Although RA 3844 was a progressive step towards agrarian reform, its implementation also faced resistance from landlords and logistical challenges limiting its effectiveness. Nonetheless, it remains a significant milestone in the Philippine government's efforts to promote social justice and rural development.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maurice Abdel Kahar. So my topic is all about the primary source in chapter 13. So in primary source, it is an act to obtain the Agricultural Land Reform Code and to institute land reforms in the Philippines, including the evolutions of tenancy and the channeling of capital info industry. Provide for the necessary implementing agencies, appropriate funds, therefore, and for other purposes. So in chapter 1, the section 1, which is the title, this act shall be known as the Agricultural Land Reform Code. This law is designed to address issues surrounding agricultural land such as land distribution, land rights, and policies that affect farmers. Land reforms often aims to correct imbalances in land ownership and promote equitable access to land for agricultural use, especially for farmers including tenant farmers and landless individuals. So in section 2, Declaration of Policy. It is the policy of the state to establish owner cultivatorship, and the economic family-sized farm as the basis of Philippine agriculture, and as a consequence divert landlord capital in agriculture to industrial development. So number 2 is to achieve a dignified existence for the small farmers free from the pernicious institutional restraints and practices. So number 3 is to create a truly viable social and economic structure in agriculture conducive to greater productivity and higher farm incomes. So number 4 is to apply all labor laws equally and without discrimination to both industrial and agricultural wage earners. Number 5 is to provide a more vigorous and systematic land settlement program and public land distribution, and to make the small farmers more independent, self-reliant, and responsible citizen, and a source of genuine strength in our democratic society. So in section 3, which is the composition of code and pursuance of the policy enunciated in section 2, the following are established under this code. Number 1 is an agricultural leasehold system to replace all existing share tenant system in agriculture. Number 2, a declaration of rights for agricultural labor. Number 3, an authority for the acquisition and equitable distribution of agricultural land. Number 4, an institution to finance the acquisition and distribution of agricultural land. So the number 5, a machinery to extend credit and similar assistance to agriculture. Number 6, a machinery to provide marketing, management, and other technical services to agriculture. Number 7, a unified administration for formulating and implementing projects of land reform. Number 8, an expanded program of land capability survey, classification, and registration. And number 9, a judicial system to decide issues arising under the code and other related laws and regulations. So the chapter 2, which is the Bill of Rights for Agricultural Labor, section 39, rights for agricultural labor to enable the farmers. So the chapter 2, which is the Bill of Rights for Agricultural Labor, section 39, rights for agricultural labor to enable the farmers. So chapter 2, which is the Bill of Rights for Agricultural Labor, section 39, rights for agricultural labor to enable the farmers, workers to enjoy the same rights and opportunities in life as industrial workers. They shall enjoy the following. Number 1, rights to self-organization. Number 2, rights to engage in concerted activities. Number 3, rights to minimum wage. And number 4 is the right to work for not more than 8 hours. Number 5, rights to claim for damages for death or injury sustained while at work. Number 6, rights to compensation for personal injuries, death, or illness. And number 7, rights against suspension or layoff. So section 40, rights to self-organization. The farm workers shall have the right to self-organization and to form, join, or assist farm workers' organizations of their own choosing for the purpose of collective bargaining through representatives of their own choosing. So this means that farm workers can negotiate as a group instead of individually with employers about work conditions, wages, and other employment terms. This process allows them to have a stronger voice when discussing their labor conditions. Farm workers have the freedom to select their own representatives for bargaining, ensuring that these representatives reflect the workers' best interests. So in section 41, rights to engage in concerted activities, the farm workers shall have the right to engage in concerted activities for the purpose of collective bargaining and other mutual aid or protection. These are actions taken by workers together as a group rather than individually. These include activities such as strikes, protests, or other forms of collective actions aimed at improving working conditions, wages, or other aspects of employment. Workers can engage in these group activities to strengthen their position in negotiations with employers, aiming to secure better terms such as higher wages, better working hours, or safer working conditions. This is also the right extent beyond just bargaining for better conditions. It also includes any activity that helps protect or aid the workers as a group. For example, if our workers are facing unfair treatment, they can come together to support each other, voice their concerns, or resist exploitations. Section 42, right to minimum wage. Notwithstanding any provision of law or contract to the contrary, farm workers in farm enterprises shall be entitled to at least 3.50 pesos a day for 8 hours work. So, these sections ensure that farm workers are entitled to receive a minimum wage, which according to the law is 3.50 pesos per day for 8 hours of work. This amount is the baseline compensation that farm workers should receive for their labor. This part of the section mean that even if there are other laws, agreement, or contracts that might state a lower wage, the farm workers are still entitled to this minimum wage. In other words, the 3.50 pesos daily wage cannot be reduced or ignored based on other legal provisions or agreements that may contradict it. The wage specified is for a full work day of 8 hours. If workers are required to work more than 8 hours, there might be additional compensation for overtime depending on other laws or agreements. So, Section 43, rights to 8 hours work notwithstanding the provision of existing laws. To the contrary, farm workers shall not be required to work for more than 8 hours daily. So, in Section 43, protects farm workers from being overworked, ensuring that their daily work hours are capped at 8. If they are asked to work more than 8 hours, they might be entitled to additional compensation or other protection depending on labor laws. So in Section 44, rights of action for damages, notwithstanding the provision of existing laws. To the contrary, Act Number 1874 as amid entitled an act to extend and regulate the responsibility for employers for personal injuries and death suffered by their employees while at work shall apply to farm workers insofar as it may be applicable. So this means that farm workers have the legal right to seek compensation like damages if they suffer personal injuries or even death while performing their work. The compensation can cover medical costs, lost wages, pain and suffering, or other related losses. So, existing law number 1874, the section refers to the number 1874, which is an old law, also known as the Employers' Liability Act, that holds employers responsible for injuries or death suffered by the employees while at work. This law established that employers are liable for accidents or harm that happen in the workplace, including on the farm. So in Section 45, right to compensation for personal injuries, death, or illness, notwithstanding the provision of existing laws. To contrary, Act Number 3428 as entitled an act prescribing the compensation to be received by the employees for personal injuries, death, or illness contracted in the performance of their duty shall apply to the farm workers insofar as it may be applicable. This means that if a farm worker suffers an injury, death, or illness while performing their job, they are entitled to compensation. Act Number 3428. This refers to the specific law known as Act prescribing the compensation to be received by employees for personal injuries, death, or illness contracted in the performance of their duty. This law outlines the system of compensation available to workers in case of work-related injuries, death, or illness. So in Section 46, rights against suspension of layoff. So they shall not suspend, lay off, or dismiss any farm workers without just cause from the time of farm workers organizations or group of farm workers has presented to the landowner a petition or complaint regarding any matter likely to cause a strike or lay out and copy they're furnished with the Department of Land or while an agricultural dispute is pending before the Court of Agrarian Relations. So, this section provides protection to the farm workers from being suspended, laid off, or dismissed by their employer. It essentially safeguards farm workers from unfair termination during certain circumstances. So the goal is to protect farm workers from being retaliated against or unfairly dismissed while there are active disputes or complaints being handled, ensuring that they can express grievance without fearing job loss. So in Presidential Decree number 27, October 21, 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos through his proclamation number 1081 signed on September 21, 1972, declared martial law all over the country and assumed all powers of government. So, Presidential Decree number 27 signed on October 21, 1972 was one of the key decrees issued by Marcos during martial law. It specifically aimed to redistribute agricultural land to farmers and promote agrarian reform. So here are the key points. So the primary goal of PD number 27 was to implement land reform, which involved redistributing land from large landowners to tenant farmers. It expropriated agricultural land, particularly from states owned by large landowners, and provided a way for farm workers to acquire ownership of the land they work on. So the decree primarily applied to the rice and corn lands in the Philippines. So tenant farmers who had been working on these lands were given the right to own the land they cultivated based on a system of the land transfer, with the government providing compensation to the landowners. So the decree aimed to improve the living standard of farmers by granting them land ownership and reducing the hold of large landowners over agricultural land. It was also seen as a way to reduce social unrest and promote economic stability in the agricultural sector, which was crucial to the country's economy at the time. So the Department of Agrarian Reform was tasked with implementing the provision of PD number 27. Land redistribution was carried out through a system of land reform programs, so it faced challenges including opposition from landowners and problems with implementation. So the martial law declaration proclamation number 1081 on September 21, 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law nationwide through proclamation number 1081. Under martial law, the president assumed extraordinary powers and civilian authority was replaced by military rule. This allowed the president to dissolve the existing constitution, suspended civil rights, and exercise power typically reserved for the judiciary and legislature. Martial law lasted for over a decade until 1981. So martial law allowed Marcos to impose significant control over various sectors of the government, including land reform, when PD number 27 was presented as a progressive move for the welfare of farmers. Its implementation and the larger martial law context raised concerns about human rights violations, suppressions of dissent, and the centralization of power under Marcos' rule. The decree was part of the broader effort by the Marcos regime to consolidate power, maintain control over the agricultural sector, and suppress potential opposition by claiming to address the needs of the rural population.
Hello everyone, my name is Kyla Abdulmuin and today I'll be presenting an overview of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP, which has been one of the most significant agrarian reform initiatives in the Philippines. This program was designed to address land inequality and improve the lives of rural farmers. Over the next few minutes, we will explore its historical context, coverage, challenges, and achievements. Let's dive in. To begin, let's take a look at the historical context of CARP. This program was introduced during the administration of President Corazon Aquino in 1988 as a response to a long-standing issues of landlessness and poverty in the Philippines. Rural areas, the core goal was to distribute agricultural lands to farmers and farm workers, empowering them and reducing social inequality. However, the implementation of GARP faced several challenges, including corruption and budgetary constraints. Despite these obstacles, the program was implemented through the Department of Agrarian Reform of DAR, and it was backed by Republic Act 9, number 6657, which provided the legal framework for the land distribution process. Next, let's discuss the coverage of CARP. This program applies to all public and private agricultural lands in the country. It also includes lands of the public domain that are suitable for agriculture, but excludes reclassified forest or mineral lands. CARP prioritized specific types of lands to expedite the process. This included rice and corn lands, lands that were idle or abandoned, and lands that landowners voluntarily offered for redistribution. The program was structured in phases, beginning with large land holdings and gradually expanding to medium and small holdings. This phase approach was intended to ensure a more manageable implementation process over the program's 10-year span. Moving on to the challenges faced during CARP's implementation, one of the most significant barriers was corruption and graft within the system, which slowed down the land distribution process and reduced its effectiveness. Additionally, there was lack of political will, which hindered the program's full implementation, and resistance from landowners further delayed progress. Despite these challenges, CARP has had mixed results. Some farmers have benefited from land redistribution, gaining the security of land ownership and better livelihoods. However, many continue to struggle with inadequate support and limited access to resources. Land redistribution and tenure security remain major issues, which suggests that further reforms are needed to address these ongoing challenges. Let's now turn to the key provisions and mechanisms of CARP that were designed to support its implementation. First, land acquisition and distribution were handled through two methods: compulsory acquisition of private agricultural lands and voluntary land transfer. For landowners, there were retention limits, which set up a maximum amount of land they could keep. In addition to land distribution, CARP also provided various support services to help farmers improve their productivity and livelihoods. This included credit assistance, technical help, and infrastructure development. Furthermore, CARP aimed to provide land tenure security by issuing land titles to beneficiaries and creating dispute resolution mechanisms to address any conflicts that arose between landowners and farmers. These mechanisms were meant to protect the rights of those who receive land under the program and ensure long-term stability for agricultural communities. In conclusion, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP, was a significant attempt to address the pressing issue of land inequality in the Philippines. It sought to reduce poverty in rural areas by redistributing land to farmers and farm workers. While CARP has achieved some successes, such as the redistribution of millions of hectares of land, it has faced challenges that have prevented it from fully realizing its goals. For the program to be truly successful, continued efforts are needed to resolve issues like land tenure security, support for farmers, and political will to implement reforms. By addressing these challenges, CARP could fulfill its potential and improve the lives of Filipino farmers for generations to come. Thank you all for your attention. That concludes my presentation on the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. I hope this overview has helped you better understand the complexities and challenges of agrarian reform in the Philippines. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.